March 1943. In the heart of the unforgiving North Atlantic, a vast, gray hell of churning water and freezing spray, some 400 miles south of Iceland. Sound of howling wind and crashing waves, this was the graveyard of ships, the hunting ground of the German wolf packs. For 47 days, Seaman Second Class Daniel O'Connor, a 19-year-old kid with no formal technical education to his name, had called this frozen wasteland home. He stood on the pitching deck of a Fletcher-class destroyer, the USS Bogue, watching the endless expanse of empty, hostile ocean. In those 47 days, he'd watched the horizon vomit fire and smoke as his convoy, a lifeline of supplies to a besieged Britain, was bled white. 14 ships. 14 steel tombs dragged to the bottom of the sea, taking with them thousands of tons of cargo and hundreds of men. The enemy was a ghost. A phantom that lived beneath the waves. The sonar operators would call out contacts, ghostly pings in the abyss, only for them to vanish. The radar screens showed nothing but the storm-tossed surface. The U-boats would strike with brutal efficiency, their torpedoes ripping through the hulls of merchantmen, and then they would dive, disappearing as if they were never there. O'Connor's gaze drifted to the row of 5-gallon buckets stacked neatly near the superstructure. They were filled with standard-issue white paint, nothing more than deck maintenance supplies. Standard naval zinc oxide primer. But as the freezing salt spray hit his face, a thought sparked in Daniel O'Connor's mind. It was an idea so profoundly simple, so utterly absurd, that it just might work. Dramatic musical sting. At 11:23 a.m., O'Connor, his heart pounding against his ribs, climbed the ladder to the bridge and approached Commander Thomas Hughes, his commanding officer. Hughes was the quintessential Annapolis man, a veteran of 18 years, a man who had seen action in 3 naval campaigns, a man whose world was governed by regulations, charts, and the cold logic of naval doctrine. He was hunched over a navigation table, his face illuminated by the dim light of the chart lamp. "Sir," O'Connor began, his voice barely steady, "I have a proposal about the U-boats." Hughes didn't even bother to look up from his charts. His voice was a low growl of impatience, worn thin by sleepless nights and the constant, grinding pressure of command. "O'Connor, you're a seaman second class. Your job is to chip paint and swab decks, not to devise anti-submarine warfare tactics. Get back to your post." O'Connor swallowed hard, refusing to be dismissed. He'd seen too many men die. "Sir, I know this sounds ridiculous, but what if we use the paint?" Now, Hughes looked up. His eyes, narrowed and weary, fixed on the young sailor. "Paint." The word dripped with incredulity. "Yes, sir." "The white paint," O'Connor pressed on, the idea tumbling out of him. "We pour it into the ocean, right where we think the U-boat is, right after it dives. If there's a submerged U-boat down there, the paint will stick to its periscope when it comes up for a look. He won't be able to see a thing, sir. We blind him." The silence on the bridge was absolute. It was so thick you could feel its weight. 3 other officers, their faces etched with fatigue, stared at O'Connor as if he had just suggested they scuttle the ship with a hand drill. The only sound was the rhythmic ping of the sonar and the groan of the destroyer's hull as it crested another wave. Sound of sonar ping. Finally, Hughes spoke, his voice dangerously calm. "O'Connor, that is, without a doubt, the single most idiotic thing I have heard in my 18 years of service." He leaned back, crossing his arms. "The U-boats don't just keep their periscopes up. The paint would disperse in the current in seconds. And even if, by some miracle, it worked, how much paint do you think we have?" "We have 340 gallons in the hold, sir," O'Connor answered immediately, his research done. "And the U-boats do raise their periscopes. They do it every 8 to 12 minutes when they're tracking a convoy. It's in the German tactics manual we captured last month." Hughes froze. He stared at O'Connor for a full 7 seconds, a look of utter disbelief on his face. "You read the captured German tactics manual?" "Yes, sir. It was on the officers' mess table. I read it while I was cleaning." Dramatic pause. How did a stupid idea from a 19-year-old deckhand become one of the most effective secret weapons against a U-boat menace? If you want to hear the rest of this forgotten story of American ingenuity, do us a favor and smash that like button. It helps us bring incredible, overlooked histories like this one out of the shadows. And make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an episode. What O'Connor had grasped was a crucial detail that the top naval engineers and strategists had completely overlooked. The German Type 7C U-boats, the workhorses of the Kriegsmarine, operated with a very specific, predictable doctrine. After an attack, they would dive deep, run silent for about 440 yards, then rise to periscope depth to confirm they weren't being pursued. Those 8 to 12 minutes between observations were their window of vulnerability. And the zinc oxide marine paint had a peculiar chemical property. It was formulated to adhere instantly to wet, metallic surfaces. Once it bonded, only an industrial-grade solvent could remove it. Sound of bubbling liquid seawater was completely useless against it. Commander Hughes didn't authorize the method immediately. The idea was too unorthodox, the source too junior. To act on it would be career suicide. Instead, he took the proposal up the chain of command to the task group commander, Robert Whitman, a man who commanded 6 destroyers in a dedicated anti-submarine hunter-killer formation. Whitman's response was as direct as it was brutal. Hughes, if you start letting 19-year-old seamen design our ASW tactics, I'll have you relieved of command before sunset. Is that clear? But then, the Atlantic intervened. On March 28, 1943, at 14:37 hours, a frantic message crackled over the radio. Convoy HX 229 was under attack. Sound of radio static and distant explosions, a wolf pack had found them. In the space of 11 minutes, 5 merchant ships were torpedoed. 5 fireballs lit up the gray horizon. The U-boat responsible submerged and vanished before the escort destroyers could even get a bearing. The USS Bogue raced to the scene, its sonar sweeping the depths. They found traces of diesel fuel slicking the surface, a telltale sign. The U-boat was close. Very close. But it was deep, lurking at an operational depth of over 360 feet, effectively invisible to the sonar of the day. O'Connor was on deck, helping secure depth charges. He saw the shimmering diesel slick. He saw the deceptively calm water. And he saw the buckets of paint. No authorization. No permission. Without consulting a single soul, O'Connor made a decision. He grabbed 2 5-gallon buckets, then ran for 2 more. 40 gallons of white paint, 80 pounds in each hand. He hauled them to the fantail, the stern of the ship, and with a grunt of exertion, he tipped them over, pouring a thick, white stream directly onto the diesel slick. The paint hit the water and blossomed, spreading into a milky, opaque cloud nearly 200 feet in diameter. From the bridge, Hughes saw it. His face flushed crimson with pure, unadulterated fury. This was insubordination of the highest order. He opened his mouth to order O'Connor's immediate arrest when the lookout in the crow's nest screamed into his microphone, his voice cracking with excitement. Periscope. Periscope. Bearing 350, range 440 yards. Tense, rising music. The U-boat had come up for a look. Its periscope sliced through the surface, emerging directly in the center of the white cloud. Aboard the U-487, its commander, Captain Lieutenant Friedrich Braun, saw nothing. His view was a uniform, blinding white. The optics were completely coated in a thick, sticky layer of paint that the seawater couldn't wash away. He ordered the scope rotated, but the white blindness remained. Braun had 3 options, each one terrible. 1. Surface completely to manually clean the periscope, an act of suicide with a destroyer known to be nearby. 2. Operate blind, submerged, near a convoy and its hunter-killer escorts, an impossible and reckless gamble. Or 3. Retreat without confirming the results of his attack, a violation of Kriegsmarine doctrine and a personal failure. Braun chose to surface. It was a fatal mistake. At 14:52 hours, the sleek, dark hull of the U-487 breached the surface, water cascading from its decks, a mere 415 yards from the USS Bogue. Its periscope was a stark, ghostly white against the gray hull. German crewmen scrambled out of the conning tower hatch with rags, desperately trying to wipe the optics clean. They never had the chance. At 14:53, Commander Hughes gave the order. All forward guns commence firing. Sound of massive 5-inch cannons firing in rapid succession. The Bogue's 5-inch guns erupted with a deafening roar. The first shell hit the conning tower, turning it into a twisted wreck of steel and flesh. The second shell punched through the pressure hull. The third struck below the waterline a mortal wound. At 14:56 hours, just minutes after surfacing, the U-487 slipped beneath the waves for the last time, taking its entire crew of 56 men with it. There were no survivors. The total time from O'Connor pouring the paint to the destruction of the U-boat, 19 minutes. Exactly. Hughes did not arrest Seaman O'Connor. Instead, he sent a detailed report to the Atlantic Anti-Submarine Command. The title, Unconventional Tactical Use of Marine Paint as a Submarine Blinding Weapon. The reply from the top brass came 48 hours later. Proposal approved for experimental implementation. Supply of 400 gallons of zinc oxide paint being dispatched to entire Atlantic fleet. Report results. They had no idea just how devastatingly effective the method would be. By April of 1943, the USS Bogue had received its new primary weapon, 620 gallons of white paint, delivered in standard 5-gallon buckets. Commander Hughes, now a believer, completely rewrote his attack doctrine. The new procedure was simple, yet brilliant. When sonar got a submerged contact, the destroyer wouldn't immediately drop depth charges. Instead, it would race to the position and dump 40 to 60 gallons of paint in a 110-yard diameter circle. Then they would wait. Sound of a ticking clock. The U-boats, creatures of habit, followed their training. Every 8 to 12 minutes, the periscope would rise and emerge into a world of white. The German commander was instantly blinded. And a blind U-boat has only two options, surface or run. Both were a death sentence. The victories began to stack up. April 3rd, U-563. Periscope blinded. Surface to clean. Sound of gunfire, and an explosion sunk in 6 minutes. April 8th, U-419. Blinded. Try to operate by sound alone. Collided with a freighter. Sunk by deck gunfire. April 11th, U-526. Blinded. Retreated without confirming its attack. Hunted by 4 destroyers for hours and sunk with depth charges. But the Germans were not stupid. The Kriegsmarine had 40,000 men in the U-boat fleet, the best naval engineers in Europe, and a high command under Admiral Karl Donitz that analyzed every single loss. By April 15th, Donitz had received 3 separate reports from U-boat commanders describing mysterious, white clouds appearing on the water just before they were attacked. The German response was swift and logical. A new tactical order was issued. Do not raise periscope if any visible substance is present on the water. Operate solely on passive hydrophones until the area is confirmed clear. This should have neutralized O'Connor's method completely. Instead, the Germans had just made a catastrophic tactical error. Because now, their U-boats were willingly blinding themselves. They had to rely solely on sound. And the Allied destroyers had a trump card the Germans never anticipated. New, quiet-running diesel engines that produced a low-frequency hum their hydrophones couldn't effectively detect at depths below 300 feet. Sinister, low music. May 1943. The Allies refined the white cloud tactic into standard doctrine. They no longer waited to detect a U-boat. Now they poured paint preventatively, creating vast, blinding fields stretching for 1.25 to 1.8 miles along known convoy routes. German U-boats trying to approach the convoys now had to navigate these fields without using their periscopes. Operating blind near a moving convoy was operationally impossible. They couldn't confirm the position of the ships, They couldn't calculate torpedo vectors, they couldn't verify range. The German commanders were forced to choose: attack blind, wasting torpedoes that cost 3,500 Reichsmarks apiece, or retreat without attacking, which was unacceptable under Donitz's orders. The slaughter continued. May 7th, U-209. Attacked blind. Fired 4 torpedoes. All missed. Sunk by depth charges. May 12th, U-258. Retreated from a paint zone, hunted for 14 hours, sunk. May 19th, U-954. Surfaced outside a paint zone to get its bearings, detected by radar, sunk in 9 minutes. If you're just discovering this incredible secret history, type "paint" in the comments below. We love to see how many people are hearing these stories for the first time. The Germans attempted chemical countermeasures. The Kriegsmarine's Chemical Warfare Division developed a solvent that could supposedly clean the zinc oxide paint underwater. They distributed it to the entire U-boat fleet in June 1943. It didn't work. The solvent required 8 to 12 minutes of continuous application to be effective. A U-boat couldn't keep its periscope extended for 12 minutes without being detected. Allied shipborne radar would get a lock on it in 90 seconds. By July 1943, a desperate Donitz issued an impossible order. U-boats were to operate completely without periscopes during their approach and attack. Navigation was to be by dead reckoning and hydrophones alone. The U-boat commanders knew it was a suicide mission, but orders were orders. The results were predictable. July 4th, U-628. Attacked blind. 0 hits. Sunk. July 11th, U-535. Attacked blind. Torpedoed an empty, straggling freighter. Sunk 30 minutes later. July 18th, U-613. The commander refused to attack without visual confirmation and returned to base. He was promptly relieved of command and sent to the meat grinder of the Eastern Front. His U-boat never returned to the Atlantic. In August 1943, the Allied Anti-Submarine Command published classified statistics that told the whole story. Sound of a typewriter clacking before the paint method. Allied losses averaged 96 ships per month, with 8 U-boats destroyed. After the paint method, Allied losses dropped to 31 ships per month, while U-boat losses skyrocketed to 23 per month. The exchange rate had been completely inverted. The Germans were now losing more U-boats than their shipyards could produce. The math was brutal and inevitable. The final U-boat kills attributed to the tactic read like a death notice for the Wolfpack strategy. August 9th, U-847. Hunted for 6 hours without its periscope. Lost the convoy. Surfaced to reorient. Sunk. August 22nd, U-523. Its commander was a veteran ace with 19 successful patrols. He refused to operate blind, raised his periscope inside a paint zone, was blinded, surfaced to clean it, and was sunk in 11 minutes. 11 U-boats were destroyed as a direct result of the paint method between March and August. But the real impact was exponentially greater. The tactic forced the Germans to abandon their entire operational doctrine, a change which reduced the effectiveness of the whole U-boat fleet by a staggering 64%. On September 3, 1943, Admiral Donitz wrote in his personal war diary, "The U-boats can no longer operate effectively in the North Atlantic. The losses are unsustainable. The submarine war has failed." 3 days later, Donitz ordered a massive withdrawal of U-boats from the North Atlantic. Of 240 operational submarines, only 60 remained on patrol. The rest were scattered to the Mediterranean and the African coasts. The Battle of the Atlantic, the longest and most critical campaign of the Second World War, was over. The Allies had won. And it all started with a 19-year-old sailor and a few buckets of paint. Daniel O'Connor was promoted to Petty Officer First Class in October 1943. He was awarded the Navy Cross, the United States Navy's second-highest decoration for valor, in a private ceremony that November. The citation read, for extraordinary tactical initiative resulting in the destruction of multiple enemy units and changing the course of the war in the Atlantic. O'Connor never spoke publicly about his method. The records remained classified until 1976. By the time they were declassified, Daniel O'Connor had already passed away from natural causes in 1968 at his home in Boston. He was only 44 years old. His job? He was an elementary school teacher. None of his students ever knew that the quiet man who taught them arithmetic had changed the course of World War II with ordinary white paint. Somber, reflective music. The USS Bogue would go on to sink 13 U-boats in total. 11 of them were credited to the paint method. Today, O'Connor's tactic is obsolete, replaced by modern sonar, anti-sub helicopters, and guided torpedoes. But in 1943, when the Atlantic was being lost and the U-boats seemed invincible, a 19-year-old kid with no formal education looked at a bucket of paint and saw a weapon. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest solutions don't come from engineering labs or military academies. They come from young men who read the enemy's mail while swabbing the decks. They come from people who look at the ordinary and see the extraordinary. The war isn't just won by generals and scientists. It's won by the sailors who dare to think differently. What do you think of this incredible story? Did you know about the crucial role this simple method played in tipping the balance of power in the Atlantic? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Every week, we bring you verified, fascinating stories that change the course of history. Be sure to hit that notification